Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you all for being here. Today we're bringing together national and local leaders to explore the connections between Arizona Literacy Plan 2030 and the Center on Early Learning Success's new research brief, Early Literacy Instruction, A State of the Field. And we're also going to hear from some local Arizona literacy leaders around the work that they are doing and championing here in our own backyard. I'm joined today by an absolutely outstanding panel that you will meet and hear from later in this presentation. But before we hear from them, I'd like to take just a few minutes to provide a high-level overview of Arizona's literacy landscape and reacquaint all of us with Arizona Literacy Plan 2030. This will help set up the connections between the plan, the research, and the strategies that you're going to hear about later in this presentation. So to kick us off, just as a friendly reminder, Read on Arizona is a statewide early literacy initiative, and our strategic focus is on improving school readiness and third grade reading outcomes. At Read on Arizona, we often say that it takes 8 years to build a reader. That's why it's so important that we focus on effective instruction in the early years and the early grades, and why the partners that you see represented here on our advisory board are so critical to this work. I'd be remiss if I didn't also mention that this advisory board includes our founding partners at the Arizona Community Foundation, Arizona Department of Education, First Things First, Helios Education Foundation, and the Virginia G. Piper Charitable Trust. So I want to start by grounding us in the why and what's possible. So we know that students who don't read proficiently by the end of third grade are 4 times more likely to leave high school without a diploma. And so this is critically important, as we know that reading proficiently by third grade is one of the clearest predictors we have of a child's long-term academic trajectory. But we know that this isn't just about ability alone, it's also about opportunity and the quality of instruction and supports that students receive. We know that when we get that right, nearly every child can become a reader. And the research shows that with the right instruction, intervention, and support, that 95% of all children can learn to read. It's why the strategies that you'll hear about today matter so much. So where does Arizona stand right now? So I want to ground ourselves in the data, both the why and our current reality, so that our national and local experts can help us see what's possible when this work is done well and done at scale. So let's start a little bit with the data, in particular the third grade ELA assessment data. So as you can see here, between 2015 and 2019, Arizona was making incremental progress in the area of third grade reading proficiency. Like much of the nation, we saw that drop in 2021 and that slight rebound in 2022. And it's held kind of stagnant since then, with some small decreases we've seen, which puts us at 36% in 2025. And so the headline really is that too many of our students still aren't reading on grade level by third grade. And that's exactly the gap that Arizona Literacy Plan wants to close. So when we break down that data even further, we see that a majority of our students are falling into that minimally proficient category for reading proficiency. And so what this means is that a student demonstrates minimal understanding of grade level reading standards and is highly likely to need academic support to be ready for the next grade. So this view you see right here adds more context to the literacy landscape by viewing proficiency based on student subgroups. Taking together these 3 views make the case that progress is possible, but it won't happen on its own. It's going to take a coordinated evidence-based plan, which is exactly what I'm going to talk about next with Arizona Literacy Plan 2030. So, July marks 1 year since we launched Arizona Literacy Plan 2030, and this plan really was the result of roughly 12 to 16 months of gathering input and commitments from state and local partners on how to align efforts and collaborate over the next 5 years and beyond. And it really lays out the actions and the proven strategies and commitments that are needed to improve school readiness and third grade reading. And so this plan is organized around a set of key drivers that you see here on the screen. And so I'll borrow a quote from my colleague Terry Clark, who says that we need to think of these not as a menu to pick from, but as a recipe. And so these ingredients must work together. And so the bottom line really is that literacy outcomes when improve when these drivers are implemented well together and at the state, community, and at the school level. And within those drivers are our Scale to Succeed strategies. And these really are the specific moves and elements that we know are going to make the biggest difference. And each one of these that you see here is measurable, it's time bound, and it's chosen because it's evidence based and it's been proven and demonstrated to work, in particularly in our Southern Surge states. And at the heart of this plan is our partner action commitments. And these are our state, regional, and local partners who have each pledged meaningful actions and steps in support of the literacy plan. And so as you can see here, it's organized by partner and by key driver. And these commitments are what bring our strategies to the scale we need in order to reach our shared goal. You're able to explore them in their entirety at ArizonaLiteracyPlan2030.org. And so this goal that you see here, this goal is what anchors everything. So by 2030, we want 72% of Arizona's third graders reading proficiently. If we think about that, that's double where we are right now. And beyond that, our visionary goal is 95% because, as I mentioned earlier, nearly every child can learn to read with the right instruction, interventions, and support. Just as a reminder, the full plan is available at ArizonaLiteracyPlan2030.org. I know that I just went through a lot in a short period of time. However, that really is the Arizona picture in this little neat little nutshell of a package, and I really want us now to really widen that lens to the national research. I am beyond delighted to turn this over to the Center on Early Learning Success and their new brief on early literacy instruction. And so I am joined today by Shervana Anderson-Bird and Dr. Amy Schmidtke to talk more about and to share their research brief on early literacy instruction. So I am going to stop sharing at this time and pass the baton over to my colleagues with the Center on Early Learning Success.
Thank you so much, Lori. It is a privilege to be here today with all of you and to talk about literacy and to learn a little bit more about Arizona. So thank you so much for sharing. Can you see my screen here?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yes, we
So
can.
wonderful. So I'm Amy Schmidtke. I'm from the Buffett Early Childhood Institute at the University of Nebraska, joined by my wonderful colleague, Shervana Anderson-Bird from the California Reading and Literature Project at UCLA. We're both part of the Center on Early Learning Success, which is a national technical assistance center that supports state, local, tribal, and regional education agencies advancing learning from preschool through third grade. Um, so one of the ways that the CELS work supports the field is by synthesizing what the research tells us on key topics in early learning. So today we're really glad to share findings from our research brief, Early Literacy Instruction, A State of the Field, which Shervana and I co-authored along with our CELS colleagues. So this is the idea that I really want to start with and want you to walk away with today. So I just want to slow down a little bit here. This brief is built on two complementary bodies of research, the science of reading and the science of early learning and development. So for years, these two fields have often been talked about and trained on as if they're in competition. And the research really doesn't support that. The science of reading tells us skilled reading depends on both accurate, automatic word recognition and strong language comprehension. It's the research base behind explicit, systematic phonics instruction, phonological awareness, and fluency. And knowing that decoding does not develop naturally, it has to be taught directly and sequentially. And its partner, the science of early learning and development, gives us a broader picture. We know children learn through interaction and play, through inquiry and meaning making, through relationships, which are the engine of development and not an add-on to it. It is the research base behind language-rich experience And it tells us development is the context for all learning, not a separate track from instruction. So here's the myth we really want to name directly that you don't have to pick a side. Rigorous phonics or rich, playful learning, you don't have to pick between those two. It's a false choice. Both sciences point the same direction. Children need explicit systematic instruction and foundational skills, and they need language rich, meaningful experiences together at the same time every day, not one before the other. So that's the framework for everything you'll hear the rest of this talk. Wherever you hear just phonics or just play, look again. The strongest practice does both at once. And that's really the premise of our research brief. So why does this tension persist in practice? A fall 2005 survey of more than 1,200 kindergarten through third grade teachers found 82% had completed science of reading aligned professional development. But coverage of oral language, vocabulary, and comprehension lagged substantially behind phonics. That pendulum swings in education all the time, right? But there's that balance in between that we really need to be mindful of. Educators don't need to choose. So the research supports both, and the professional learning, the supports, the guidance really needs to support both as well. The research brief is organized around five tenets, five consistent findings that emerge across both the science of reading and the science of early learning and development. So we're going to walk through them one at a time. I'll start with number one. Tenet one is language is the foundation of literacy development. Children build the skills needed for reading and writing through listening, speaking, and meaningful conversation. Research shows sustained back and forth conversational exchanges, serve and return interactions, are directly tied to vocabulary growth and later reading comprehension. So here's the risk. Children can learn to decode words accurately and still fail to understand what they read if oral language is underdeveloped. So, decoding gets you to the words. Language comprehension is what lets you make meaning from them. So, this needs to happen at every grade through play and storytelling in the early years and through discussion, academic discourse, read alouds, and talking before writing in first through third grade. So by third grade, reading shifts from learning to read to reading to learn. And children need that oral language foundation to make the leap. So with that, I'll hand to Shervana for the remaining four tenets.
Thank you, Amy. Tenet 2 is that literacy develops through interdependent systems. So that means word recognition and language comprehension must develop together. The simple view of reading captures this. Reading comprehension equals decoding multiplied by language comprehension. If either is 0, then comprehension breaks down. Scarborough's reading rope shows the exact same thing. Word recognition strands and language comprehension strands are woven together because we can't develop one side of the rope. Tenet 3 is about how instruction has to reflect how children actually develop. So literacy begins before they ever come to school, in everyday conversations, in the storytelling they hear at home. Then in preschool and kindergarten, children build vocabulary through guided play, read alouds, and early writing. In grades 1 through 3, foundational skills instruction becomes more systemic and explicit. And around third grade, children shift from learning to read to reading to learn, but playful, engaging learning doesn't stop at kindergarten. Collaborative inquiry and project-based learning keep strengthening comprehension all the way through grade 3. Tenet 4 addresses a persistent myth that educators must choose between explicit instruction and meaningful child-centered learning, and they don't. Explicit systematic instruction in foundational skills is essential. There is a system for phonics and phonological awareness and how it is taught. But skills taught in isolation without connection to real world reading, and writing limit children's ability to transfer that learning. Writing is another powerful example. Even in early forms like drawing and labeling, it exercises phonological awareness and vocabulary and comprehension all at once. Tenet 5. Tenet 5 may be the most important for equity because every child brings linguistic, cultural, and experiential knowledge into the classroom. And those are all assets and not deficits. So for our multilingual learners, conceptual knowledge transfers across languages. What a child understands in Spanish or Somali or Haitian Creole supports comprehension in English. Belonging has real instructional weight. So when children see their languages and experiences reflected in the classroom, they participate more and they persist. And families are essential partners in this work. So everyday conversations, storytelling at home, all of those rich literacy experiences all contribute to this as well.
Thank you, Sharvana. So across the research brief, the practice brief, and the bright spots brief, because there's these three accompanying briefs, our recommendations for states, districts, and educators come back to the same through line. Build a shared pre-K through third grade vision, invest in professional learning that holds both sciences together, honor children's home languages, and create real partnerships with families. And one thing that really struck us reviewing Arizona's literacy plan is how closely it already reflects these findings. We're preaching to the choir here, which is always really fun to be in fellowship with like-minded people. What you're going to continue to hear through this time together from Arizona, it isn't a separate story. It's these 5 tenets in action. You can use this QR code here to access these resources. And with that, we'll hand it back to the moderators for a few questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sharvana. A couple of questions. Thank you for sharing the tenets and really talking about that perceived tension between the science of learning and development and the science of reading. One of the things that you shared was that the brief places oral language at the center of literacy development. What practical strategies can educators use to increase the quality and frequency of meaningful back and forth conversation throughout the school day, not just during those literacy blocks?
Dervana, do you want me to take that one or do you want to talk? Okay, for me. I mean, I would say just it very simply, the one who is doing the talking is the one who's doing the learning. So if a teacher is doing the most of the talking and the children are not having an opportunity to converse, talk with them, be a part of the dialogue, then you probably do not have a classroom that is supportive enough of language development because speaking and listening are active practices for children, dialogue, thinking about how many back and forth exchanges you have with a child. Are you just asking one question and then they have one answer and then you move on to the next child? Or do you have rich discourse and dialogue around both them as people in those relational kinds of conversations and language development, but also around content learning? Are you talking about math in back and forth exchanges? Are you talking about stories in back and forth exchanges where children can really express themselves and receive information through language discourse?
Thank you so much. Sharvana, did you want to add on to that?
I do. I just want to say, especially in the generation that our students are in right now, they need the opportunity to learn those social norms as well. And we learn those norms through conversation. And we're competing with technology and screens and all these other things. So anytime you have the opportunity to practice that, I'm listening while you're listening while I'm speaking, you're expanding, then that's giving them a skill that they can take with them throughout life. So we want to make sure we could afford that for them when possible.
In the
Thank
early childhood field, we really center on if you can't learn to read a word that you haven't spoken yourself and used in oral language. So it's just a very kind of pragmatic approach to talk, 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 listen, 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 because later that will be what you read, 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 and write, write, write.
Thank you both so much, and I know we're going to have more opportunities for questions as we move forward. I'm going to shift us just a bit to talk about some of the strategies that are happening locally. If you do have any questions, put them in the chat. We're also going to have time at the end for that Q&A session. At this time, I would like to invite Superintendent Rachel Lewis to come and join us. Oh. Superintendent Lewis is the superintendent of schools for Navajo County. Thank you and welcome. We're going to hear from her today about literacy-based coaching that's happening in rural Arizona.
Thank you so much, Lori. I'm so happy to be here and share a little bit of the work that we've been doing in Navajo County. Navajo County is in the northeastern part of Arizona. We have the Navajo Reservation all the way down to the Apache Reservation and everything in between. So I'm so excited to share how we've started to build a coaching infrastructure in rural communities. This all was kicked off and sparked with the Comprehensive Literacy State Development Grant, which was awarded in 2020. And what our office decided to do was help our teachers with letters training and to receive that literacy endorsement that was required by first, I believe it was 2025, and then we pushed to 2028, and we don't want them to push it anymore. We want everyone done by 2028. But we were able to have two schools benefit from that training through the grant. And since the grant, since these other districts saw what great things were happening and all of the learning that was happening through this grant, the schools have contracted with the county to get their teachers trained as well. And so we're on our last cohort, hopefully, because letters is a 2-year training for us, and we're getting all of our teachers trained. So that was really the start, having our teachers trained in both sciences, and letters is able to do that. And really, what's really essential in starting a coaching infrastructure is making sure that you understand the strengths and needs and cultures of your district. Like I said, our county is varied. We have a lot of different communities, and being able to start at the county level builds infrastructure and capacity for smaller schools. A lot of our schools don't have it in their budgets to be able to hire any type of coach, let alone a literacy coach. A lot of our schools do have instructional coaches, but we really wanted to hit the literacy piece. And so as we've started at the county level, we have 3 county level coaches. Throughout our districts, we have 1 specific literacy coach, but 8 instructional coaches. And to continue that professional development, we've established a monthly coaching collaborative. And so we're able to bring all of our coaches together to share ideas. I love that we have our 4 literacy coaches there to be able to impart, the important piece, this literacy piece, and hopefully get them further trained. And exciting, we have through this, we've had a 97% passing rate of our Foundations of Literacy exam. That was very exciting. We were at 100 for quite a while and down to 97, but we'll still take that. So we're very proud of that. So how has this impacted teachers and students so far? We've only had the grant since 2020. We started our coaching collaborative about 2 years ago, and we've had measurable student outcomes. We have an amazing education specialist, Susan Midkiff, and she was one of our literacy coaches that really helped, and she's our letters instructor and really helped jumpstart this as well. So Vernon Elementary District is an exciting, and this was right during the time when we implemented the PD, so through letters and coaching. That combination was amazing, and their scores went up 13 points. Sholo USD, you can kind of see the trend there from the last few years, the 3 years, and we're so excited to see this 4th year. We don't have the official scores yet because really that's taking our kinders all the way to 3rd. But what's really exciting about this data is you see our green proficient growing and our below average shrinking. And that's what we really want. We want to see that bigger green area. Of course, we want above average too, but in seeing that below average shrinking, and that was their benchmark test in second grade. And so you can really see the impact of that implementation of having a certified literacy coach in the school, and that's what's happening in Show Low Unified School District. We're very proud of the progress they're making there. Outcomes for teachers, qualitative outcomes, and this is really what I think is where the direction we're wanting to go, is that the teachers that are being coached, they're confident. That's what we want. We want to take off the training wheels, help them feel that they're confident and that they know the science of reading combined with the science of child development, putting that together and knowing that they are doing their students right. They've been able to self-reflect and say, hey, am I doing what's best for my students? And this is amazing. They have responsibility for student instruction. You know, a lot of times we can say, oh, it's our community, it's the parents' fault. It's, well, we only have our students where we have them, and our coaches have been able to see that those teachers that are being coached are taking on that responsibility, that it's my responsibility here, and I can give instruction driven by research and our student data. So as we were talking about in the brief, one of the tenets is, well, coaches can help subdue this and or tension. So I was a letters student myself with Susan before I was in this position. And a lot of the conversations I heard was, okay, this is great, but how are we going to implement this in our class? You know, we've got our phonics program, but we're seeing that we need to do this other side of Scarborough's rope. And what are the practical ways to do this, to integrate foundational skills and oral language vocabulary comprehension work in the classroom? And so if you have a coach with your teachers, they have to be trusted. Our teachers have to know that these coaches, they have the education that's important. They know that they can go to them. And Susan was our coach, and we knew that she was an expert, so we could go to her. And then building that relationship is so essential. Our coach from Show Low USD, she said it took at least a good year to build that relationship. We weren't doing much coaching that first year. That first year was building the relationship. And then the second and third year, she was able to go in and have candid conversations with the teachers, that they would be comfortable, that they felt comfortable with her going in and saying, hey, maybe this is what you could do to integrate both ends of the rope, and here's what you could do. So coaches are amazing because they give immediate feedback. We know through research that students do well with immediate feedback, so why don't our teachers? They do well with immediate feedback. It's real-time professional development through letters. Even though it's over a 2-year course, that's a lot of information to cram in, and so our coaches keep that professional development going, and especially through modeling. So if a teacher's saying, well, I understand how we're supposed to implement this, you're telling me, but then a coach can actually go and model and show explicitly, hey, this is how you can do it, and implement it into the classroom. So another alignment, language is the foundation of literacy development. Again, coaches can give that modeling to show that this is how we can integrate these two things. And what I've noticed in our county, which is so interesting, is our students don't have necessarily the experiences that they might find in some of the books they're reading. They might not know what this is, me long ago, and they're kind of non-existent, but what a mall is, right? Someone's going into a mall. Well, some of our students haven't been in a place where there's a mall. And so you can just take different things through read alouds, different experiences, and integrate that. Coaches can show how to do that. Explicit instruction. So coaches model for teachers, teachers can model for students. And like I said, what does this look like in the classroom? So developmentally informed pathways matter. They do. They matter across pre-K through third grade. And a lot of our, like I said before, a lot of our coaches, they've been used to this curriculum that they've had for years. They're being introduced to new information, and coaches can show how to integrate that by 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 showing that these systems are interdependent. It's not just one or the other, it's both. In alignment with Arizona Literacy Plan 2030, building educator capacity. We're so excited that we've been able to do that. We've had, I don't have my numbers with me, but it's over 200 teachers throughout the county that have been trained, and we have more coming. And we're turning this learning 286. Thank you, Susan. Susan's on. She's got it. We're turning this learning into action, and we're seeing the effectiveness of that action and scaling up evidence-based literacy solutions. It builds teacher confidence. Like I said, it's great to have a coach on hand, but I think the overall goal is to be able to, like I said, take the training wheels off the teachers, let them feel confident that they know what they're doing, but the coaches are still there for that back and forth dialogue to help understand what might be missing here. How can you help me improve? So, and engaging families and communities to support school readiness and literacy. So we're expanding access to high quality early learning just through our teachers, but we're so excited about our next steps because we are partnering with our Navajo County Library District, and we have our trainer, Susan, teaching our programmers in the science of reading and the continuum. We're getting the families involved. So, you see where can we reach the families? At the libraries. Our families and early readers go through the library, so why shouldn't our programmers be informed with this information? Why shouldn't they know the tenets behind why are we doing read alouds with these kids? What little phonological awareness cues can I add while I'm doing this? So we're very, very excited that we're going to keep bringing it into the community and connecting with families.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Lewis. I think one of the things you had mentioned that you had done the letters training, but I don't think everyone knows that you are a former reading specialist. So you have that background about very well entrenched in the science of reading and early literacy. And thank you, Susan, for dropping those numbers 286 that are being trained. And certainly I saw some hearts go up when you talked about 97% of your teachers have passed the foundations of reading exam. I know it was 100 and now it's 97, but still so impressive. And sharing those results that you had with Vernon and Sholo, just very impressive. Talking about PD and coaching coming together, almost like in this harmonized way to support teachers and therefore supporting that instruction. I did have a follow-up question since we're on the Arizona Literacy Plan slide. Is we know that one of the key drivers, as you have on here, is building educator capacity in the science of reading and really ensuring that teachers have the knowledge and tools to deliver that explicit and systematic instruction that you were talking about. One of the things we also talked about in the brief is there is really thinking about how you're preparing teachers for that phonics instruction, that oral language, those 5 pillars of early literacy. How is the coaching and the training helping to support that in your county? And can you speak just a little bit more to the improvements that you're seeing?
Sure. So I could pull from my school because that's that's where this I kind of all started and was able to build the momentum. So I was a Title I reading specialist, and even though I was a reading specialist, I benefited from a coach because I knew these two things were happening, but I think sometimes we're so focused on, okay, we need those foundational skills that we override, the back and forth dialogue like we were talking about. And so a coach can come in and show throughout the day how those moments can happen where there is authentic conversation. And, don't worry and don't get so hung up on the phonics because look, here is your writing writing session, and I can see that let's introduce some nonfiction decodables here. Um, I think that's the direction I saw in my first grade level that I was helping with, and we were able to show teachers that, we can still have that foundational skill, but let's introduce some things that maybe they didn't know about, and we can have a discussion about sharks or things that are happening there. And that's really what has happened in Sholo district too. And these teachers have conversations, and they have conversations about data, but they also break down that data into, those strands of those skills and also all parts of the rope where, okay, we're seeing that our letter recognition is going great, but we are having trouble with comprehension because they're not understanding the words that we're reading. And so having those data talks, those data walks together and integrating both of those ropes and having that outside perspective. Our teachers are so entrenched sometimes with, they wear so many hats in these rural communities, they're drowning. And so the coach is that outside perspective to say, hey, this is where we could fill in those gaps.
No, I appreciate that. And the data walks and the data talks and acknowledging all that teachers have on their plates and how that coach is coming in as that support, and that lifeline and really sort of helping them through that process. I appreciate that. And if you guys have any questions for Superintendent Lewis, feel free to put them into the chat. We're going to have some time for some Q&A at the end. Thank you, Superintendent Lewis. We so greatly appreciate it. I'm now going to shift us over to the early part of this continuum. We've talked about early childhood and early literacy as it relates to that birth to third grade continuum. And so now we're going to talk about what happens in those early years. So I'd like to invite Carrie Taylor with Southwest Human Development to join us and to speak about Journey Through Books.
Thank you, Lori, for inviting me to present on Journey Through Books. I remember the day that the brief came out, or a week later, you and I met, and I told you how excited I was. So it's really exciting for the opportunity for me to share more about our program. So before we dive into Journey Through Books, I wanted to go through to introduce you to Southwest Human Development if you aren't aware of our organization. Southwest Human Development is the largest early childhood organization, nonprofit organization in the state of Arizona. For more than 40 years, we've focused on creating positive futures for young children by strengthening foundations for Arizona's children need for a great start in life. And I think when I talk about Journey Through Book, you can see how we're trying to lay those foundations for great reading at third grade. So we have over 40 programs. We serve 140,000 people annually. And our 40 programs fall into these core service areas. And so if you want more information, you can go on our website, but we have lots of child development programs, disability and mental health services, and professional development and training, and family support like Healthy Families. And then we have our early literacy program, which I'm going to talk about one of our programs, Journey Through Books. But we also have Raising a Reader, which is an 8 weeks parent playgroup for parents of children birth to 5 with their children. And we have Let's Talk Dads, which is a partnership with Southwest Human Development, the Steve Nash Foundation, and University of Chicago. So Journey Through Books is a 10-month professional learning and coaching program. And it's designed to help educators create and sustain language and literacy-rich experiences for children from birth to age 5. Primarily, the educators that we serve are in private childcare settings. And so when I talk about educators, I'm talking about teachers, teaching assistants, and directors. And we really have 3 core goals that we anchor our work on, mirroring what Lori said. One is responsive caregiving. We know that children develop within the context of relationships, especially in those very, very early years. Because remember, we start at birth. Our program provides support to teachers caring for very, very young children. We try to help teachers become intentional in their responses and their caregiving and be really good communication partners. The second core goal is shared reading and language. JTB builds oral language and vocabulary as foundations that support later reading and success. We try to help teachers learn how to intentionally use books, conversation, vocabulary, storytelling, and literacy-rich practices throughout the day. The one thing we really talk about with shared reading is that shared reading is like a conversation, it's a dialogue. It's not just the teacher reading to the child. The other thing is creating literacy-rich environments in early childhood, setting the stage, so to speak. You get those early literacy environments. You have writing in different centers and books, and you have a well-stocked reading corner, dramatic play area. So we really talk to the teachers about setting that stage so children can explore and have inquiry, and teachers have time to sit down and actually have conversations and interact with them. So at the core of Journey Through Books is about building educator capacity. The teachers and the directors from the centers that are enrolled in Journey Through Book come to the professional learning communities. You can see on the left the list of the topics that we train on. We divide them into 4 professional learning communities that happen across the 10 months. And so we also know that with training, the implementation comes most effectively when you also provide support. So one of a really important piece of our program that we believe in is that we provide biweekly coaching to the teachers after the PLCs so they can practice, they can get feedback, they can plan on future implementation. We also have monthly director support, so the directors can meet with the coaches and talk about what they learned. The goal with the director is not only to support the teachers enrolled in JTB, but think about sustaining the practices across the center in more classrooms. And one thing that I wanted to mention is that when programs enroll, the directors commit to setting aside a time for the teachers to meet with the coaches outside of the classroom, which if you work in early care and education centers, you know that's a really big win. And so we're really excited that when that can happen, that it happens. And then last but not least, each class receives 30 books across the 10-month period to use for their library. So one of my favorite things about JTB are these fixed supports. They're materials that we use. We teach a concept during PLC, and then they're materials they use to plan and implement. And they're really a more structured approach to help teachers learn the concepts and then be able to go and implement them and have the coach kind of look at it together to see what's working and what's not working. So who is this child? We talk about how important it is for children to have a sense of belonging. This tool is really a tool that teachers sit down and complete either with the family or without the family, but they really gather information to help them know each child so they can support them during the day and make sure that the child feels a sense of belonging, that they see themselves in the classroom. The infant shared reading journey and storyteller maps are 2 different age-tailored guides for shared reading. We have one for infants and toddlers and then one for toddlers and preschoolers. Both of them not only have the steps for shared reading, but at the end they have integration so the teachers can plan about what are the concepts and vocabulary that we introduce, the topics of the book, and how can we integrate them throughout the day. And the infant shared reading journey really focuses on helping those teachers teaching very young children to pause and do that serve and return. So they're building that language development in those story times because, you know, they have very short attention span, but when they do, we want the teachers to be responsive. And the last one is try this book corner. The teachers fill it out at the beginning of the year and then at the end of the year. It's a self-assessment tool. They go around and say, is my book corner, is it cozy? Does it have books and genres that represent the classroom? And then do we need to move the materials? Also making sure their inventory is their books inventory is good. And then what we really try to help them is look at the children and those, who is this child, and say, do your books reflect the children's cultural abilities in the classroom? So Amy gave me a word that I couldn't figure out, but when she said that there are 2 sciences, 1 practice, I feel like in early childhood is a natural integration because children learn within the context of routines and interactions and hands-on learning and exploration. So I just looked at the ground, like how is science of reading grounded in our trainings and our coaching. So we focus on the foundational skills over on the left. And we do training, coaching, follow-up. We have tools for oral language and vocabulary, writing, phonological, phonemic awareness, print concepts, and alphabet knowledge. And if you look on the read-on skills staircase to reading, down there at the birth to five, those are the foundational oral language and emergent literacy skills that we really focus on. And I think through our shared book reading and some of our other trainings that we provide, we also help teachers understand how to build the background knowledge of the children through shared reading and conversations and active exploration. So we have a big job if we're to lay those foundational skills. So by third grade, we got the 72%. So also looking at how is Journey Through Books grounded in the science of learning and development. We're based on developmentally appropriate practices. I think that the tension between the and or is that you can have both teacher-led experiences and child-led experiences, that they don't have to be one or the other, but there should be a good mix. And so we look at how do we support interaction, play, inquiry, and relationships throughout the day, through routines, relationships, and shared reading and integration. So I feel like both of those sciences are really nice together for early childhood. Looking at the alignment with the state priorities, so when we develop the Journey Through Book curriculum, we use the ADE Early Learning Standards as well as the Infant Toddler Developmental Guidelines. So there are times when the coach has an opportunity, if the director asks them, like, where does this fall in the early learning guidelines, so we know what we're teaching. So we have that crosswalk that's available to the teachers and directors. Looking at the Arizona Literacy Plan, I think building educator capacity, we do the professional learning communities followed up by the literacy coaching. We're scaling up evidence-based solutions for early childhood, looking at relationship-based practices, shared book and reading language. Engaging families and communities. Now, Journey Through Book staff don't engage with families. They do, however, provide tools like Who is This Child and the Try This Book Corner tool to help support the teachers in engaging children, the families of the children in their classroom. And then expanding access to early learning. In the last year, we had 18 birth to five classrooms and 46 participants. Generally, for every site we have 2 teachers, an infant teacher, a preschool teacher, and a director. So we've been doing Journey Through Books for a long time, and it would be fascinating to go back and see how many opportunities we had to expand access for children to early learning. So you might want to know, well, what's the impact of Journey Through Books? So this is the data from our 2024-2025 cohort. We had the 46 educators and 18 programs. And in the pre and post surveys, the teachers reported that they had a change in practice with responsive caregiving, shared reading routines, using the targeted language practices, setting up print-rich environments, and improving the culturally responsive practices. And then the coaches, once a month, they would actually observe the teacher and mark the times that they use the different language teaching practices. And so we saw growth overall for 10 of the 12 practices that we observed. Stronger literacy environments, you can see the classroom book corners before and after below. And then we had an independent observer do the early language and literacy classroom observation, which is called ELCO. And the ELCO showed that we have greatest gains in book and book reading, print and early writing, and language environment, which kind of goes back to those core focus areas that I talked about. But one of the really exciting things that the teachers do videotaped shared reading, and they upload it. And over the course of the year, we saw a shift, teachers using whole group reading to small group reading and individual child reading, which is a huge progress, because we know children have so many more opportunities for those serve and return interactions when they have a smaller group, or even the infants and toddlers, and they do it individually. So that was exciting for us to see. So thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Karen. I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment. Um, and just say, wow. I mean, the Journey Through Books program, grounded in the science of reading, science of early learning development. It's aligned to the standards. It's supported by PLCs and coaching. And there is this great demonstrated impact that you've shown. And so just want to say, great job and kudos for that. I have, just a couple of questions after you spotlighted the Journey Through Books program. And so we know that, expanding access to high quality early learning is also one of those key drivers of the Arizona literacy plan. And so we know that Journey Through Books is doing that work, reaching children 0 to age 5 in those early care and education settings across Arizona. Can you tell us, when you think about, you talked a little bit about the serve and return, and you pointed out the alignment to the CLS brief. Can you talk about, you mentioned briefly the journey, not briefly, you talked about Journey Through Books, but you also talked about that Southwest Human Development sort of has a compendium of other literacy resources. Can you touch just a little bit briefly on how those support, high quality early literacy experiences in that birth to 5 space?
Sure, sure. So our Raising a Reader is part of the National Raising a Reader, but we do something different than the Red Book rotation. We actually have an 8-week parent play group, and the curriculum actually mirrors what I showed that we teach in JTB, but within the context of each Raising a Reader series. And so parents are introduced to a concept like rhyming. We have a rhyming book, they do an activity, and then they go home and practice and come back, and the facilitators or coaches ask the parents what worked, what did you implement. So it really aligns with the idea that I shared in the foundations of reading that we teach in JTB, but it's in a different format and it is more playgroup based, and we facilitate it, and it really builds on helping parents understand how to grow their child's language and vocabulary.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you sharing Journey Through Books and a little bit about Southwest Human Development, Carrie. We're going to open up to audience questions, and I see that we have one, so I'm going to pass this question over to Shervana Anderson Bird with the Center on Early Learning Success. So we got this question a little early on. Were there any surprises that you noted in the EL instructional research brief? Did anything kind of take you by surprise or catch you off guard a bit?
Well, there was nothing that we saw in the research that was causing harm. I think we were just dispelling the myths that you have to teach reading as a either or. There are elements of, shared reading that are still part of foundational literacy. It's just about that direct and explicit instruction time. And then, of course, giving kids the opportunity to actually practice and use it in a way that is not going to be as constructive or constrictive, even for them to practice their language and the reading that they've picked up. So we really wanted to focus on, this is not a fight for teaching reading. It is a fight to make sure they can read, but not a fight for teaching reading. So standing on the ground of good research, seeing that this is what we're supposed to be doing, we're moving in the right direction, but also bringing in that developmental piece that every child is different. Every child might be at a different phase. Someone might be ready for phonics while someone else is still just in a phonemic awareness phase. So being really aware of our students. So nothing surprising, just things that we know we should be doing. And now here's our opportunity to implement them.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open up this question to everyone on the panel while we have a couple of minutes left. How can community partners, families, and local organizations support efforts to accelerate school readiness and early literacy? I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but we're joined by community partners and school districts, so I would love to hear from the panel your thoughts on that.
I'll go ahead and answer a little bit. I just really think if you're passionate about reading and you know this information, share it with your community leaders, share it with your mayor, share it with your board of supervisors, share it with your legislators. Let them know this data. They don't always know, and they don't always know they're not always up to speed. They're not reading specialists, so they don't always know. And let them know that it is important to you and that you want support for this. You want to see it in your schools. If you don't see it happening in your local school, go to your admin. Just start somewhere. If you see there needs to be a change, speak up.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Lewis. Carrie, did you have anything to add to that?
Well, what I was thinking is that, I think it's really important for parents to understand that the idea that reading starts much later in life, that community partners help parents understand that those skills begin at birth, that there's so many ways that they can encourage them to develop those foundational skills and offer opportunities through their programs if they can, integrate it into their home visiting programs if they can, but just really educating parents that it really starts much, much earlier. And maybe educating community partners that it starts much, much earlier.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have one last question, and I'd like to have Shervana answer first if we can. So, what do you want attendees to take away from today's session and share with your colleagues?
I'd love for the takeaway to be that we are teaching the whole child language and literacy. And so considering their development, that's considering their family, considering their background, considering their experience, all of those pieces will have an impact on the motivation and the endurance for them to continue literacy through the ages.
Thank you. Superintendent Lewis or Carrie, do you have anything to add? It's okay if we don't. I'm going to close us out real quick. So many of you, oftentimes, when we talk about Arizona Literacy Plan 2030 and we share what's happening locally and we share what's happening nationally, a lot of times we get messages either during the session or via email asking, well, how can we be a part of Arizona Literacy Plan 2030? The work that we're doing is so critically important. It aligns to one of these key drivers. How can we partner and align to this? And if you're interested in submitting a partner action commitment for Arizona Literacy Plan 2030, you are able to reach out to myself or to my colleague Terry Clark, who is on the presentation today as well. So with that, I want to say that we do have the resources from everyone who was on the panel today. We'll make sure to share those with you. I want you guys to take a moment to thank our panel, providing that national research perspective, dispelling those myths, and then to our local Arizona leaders showing us what's possible. We heard from Superintendent Lewis when we combine that PD with that coaching. We saw what happened in Vernon and Sholo, and then Journey Through Books, such a great example of when we take early literacy programming, align it to the standards, anchor it in that science of reading, and then support it with those PLCs and coaching, we see that impact and moving that needle relative to school readiness and early literacy is possible. So on that note, also thank you all for taking this time to join us today, and have a wonderful afternoon.